Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and coming up in today's newscast, the Israeli Prime Minister has given up the mandate to form a government coalition. Wondering where all the money is? Well, we'll reveal just how many millionaires live in Israel. And we hope you're hungry because Israel has just broken a new record, and you can literally eat it. Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu's deadline for forming a government is now just a day away, but with no feasible prospects in the works, Netanyahu has returned the mandate back to President Rivlin, meaning blue and white Benny Gantz will most likely get his chance to form a coalition. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister is blaming Gantz along with his rivals Yair Lapid and Avigdor Liebermans for his own failure to form a government, saying a unity coalition is still possible.
גנץ התעשת. אם הוא ישתחרר מהלפיתה של לפיד וליברמן, אם הוא יזנח את רעיון ממשלת המיעוט, נוכל להקים יחד את הממשלה שמדינת ישראל כל כך זקוקה לה בעת הזאת. ממשלת אחדות לאומית רחבה של כל אלה המאמינים במדינת ישראל כמדינה יהודית, כמדינה דמוקרטית. זה היה הפתרון וזה נשאר הפתרון.
For now, though, with Netanyahu twice failing to negotiate a coalition, blue and white Kachol Lavan chairman Benny Gantz will get the chance to put together a ruling government for himself. Now, the question is, are his chances any better than Netanyahu's? Well, with just 28 days to go, Kachol Lavan already announced that the time for spin is over, and blue and white is determined to form the liberal unity government headed by Gantz that the nation chose a month ago. But the numbers still tell another story. Lieberman and his Israel Beitenu party have yet to pledge support for any party, leaving 8 seats unaccounted for. And then you have the left-wing and Arab parties, which have supported blue and white, but only make up a total of 54 seats. So, without Lieberman, Gantz falls short of the 61 majority he needs. The only other option, then, is to look across the aisle and attempt to poach parties from the right-wing bloc. But here is the problem. The right-wing and ultra-Orthodox parties have already formed a bloc of 55 seats behind Netanyahu, pledging not to budge for what the PM calls a minority government. Time will tell then if any compromise can come about or if third elections are on the horizon. And now for more on the future of government negotiations, now that Netanyahu has handed back the mandate, we have senior Middle East analyst from the International Crisis Group, Ofer Salzberg. So the first question here is, what are Gantz's chances?
Gantz's chances appear to be very low. As you have said, his ability to reconcile Lieberman with the joint list seem unlikely. The ultra-Orthodox are that traditionally would have been kingmakers and were willing to swing from left to right are no longer there after their public shifted very much to the right. And they are afraid of payback in the next elections. And the only option that the Prime Minister is flagging, the notion of a minority government, seems to be unstable. There is opposition to it even within blue and white. So the odds seem grim for Mr. Gantz.
So it would mean that there would have to be some type of unity government formed, or we would essentially go to third elections, right?
Yes, correct. And the unity government would mean both leading parties, that is to say blue and white and the Likud, abrogating some of their commitments to their electorate.
Right.
Neither seems keen to do so. The one wild card is essentially whether the Attorney General is going to indict Netanyahu during the coming 28 days, and if so, for what? Specifically, will it be also for bribe? And perhaps this will change things in the system, though even that does not appear to be very likely.
So we talked about these 54 seats that, you know, the center-left party has with Gantz. But let's talk about the Arab Israeli voters. Many say that their huge voter turnout, which we saw, was one of the biggest in Israeli history, and it's what turned the tables for Netanyahu and the Likud party. Now, 10 out of the 13 seats of the Joint Arab List party have endorsed Gantz, of course, we all know that, but to gain the support of the right and Lieberman, he would essentially have to say no to them. You're not allowed to be part of this government because Lieberman is unwilling to sit with the Arabs, so are the right-wing parties. But then how would the Arab voters react to a scenario like that?
It seems that the Arab electorate is nevertheless first very content. They've already managed to do what was declared to be the main objective, which is to prevent Netanyahu from establishing a government.
Right.
And in this sense, against great skepticism among Arab voters in Israel, democracy in fact proved effective. Actually voting in spite of claims regarding the discrimination and so on, some of them with veracity, they see that it's effective. And in that sense, if there will be third elections, I think that voter turnout among Arabs will be even higher now that they see that they can have impact.
Right.
Secondly,
if they can become a part of the government, is what you're saying.
So there is a gap between the Arab voters, where according to polls, 3/4 are interested in the party, the joint list, entering a coalition, and the Arab MKs, none of whom expresses any desire to sit in a Zionist coalition.
Right.
So we are still there basically looking at whether a coalition could be established based on support from the outside by the joint list, rather than actually sitting inside. And even this, so far as we all know, Mr. Lieberman is rejecting.
Well, how is the Arab public reacting to this endorsement of Gantz, which it's very unique?
Absolutely. It's very unique, not least because Mr. Gantz took pride during his campaign of bombing Gaza and things that are not popular among Arab voters. And this seems to reflect mostly a change on the Arab side rather than on the Jewish side, meaning I don't think that Herzog and Livni had a very different platform than Mr. Gantz. And we see that a lot of it is because of the way that the right-wing government, the last one, has been inciting against Arabs in Israel, basically characterizing their mere participation in the vote as a problem. And they've rallied against it. And in this sense, we are seeing them basically saying that one has to engage, that boycotting and ending all contact is not effective.
Right.
And they would like to influence from within.
Well, speaking about being effective, how do you make sure that 20% of the Israeli population, which is this Arab Israeli population, is accounted for in a government that doesn't necessarily have much of an Arab representation? Will that actually challenge the state's Jewish identity or promote diversity?
Yeah, that's a very big question. Simply put, because they are not yet talking about being within a coalition, that coalition will still likely be along Zionist lines. And what we've seen also in the past is that they will condition their support on specific policies, and specifically policies regarding Arabs in Israel, redressing discrimination, dealing with illegal firearms among Arabs, and renewing a political process aimed towards ending the Israeli control of the West Bank, of the occupation. And in this sense, it's not about diluting Israel's identity and challenging it altogether. They are demanding to revoke the nation-state law. And those who think that Israel was not a Jewish and democratic state before that basic law was instated would claim that this does challenge the identity.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting to see what plays out here with Gantz being given the mandate. But thank you so much for joining us.
Gladly.
All right. In other news, Prime Minister Netanyahu is receiving plenty of well wishes for his 70th birthday this week, but one in particular is making headlines, and all has to do with the imprisoned Israeli-American Naama Issachar. ILTV's Aaron Porras is here with a report.
Coming from Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin called on Monday to congratulate Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu over his 70 years on Earth, returning the favor in a sense after Netanyahu called to wish Putin a happy birthday when he was turning 67 in early October. But the two leaders didn't just discuss their favorite cake flavors and gifts. Officially, Putin and Netanyahu discussed bilateral challenges and the deteriorating situation unfolding in eastern Syria. But unofficially, the two talked about Naama Issachar, and officials familiar with the phone call confirmed that Issachar was brought up after Netanyahu sent a formal pardon request last week. The 26-year-old Naama was arrested during a stopover in Moscow last April on charges of drug trafficking. She had a little under 10 grams of cannabis in her bags as she was making her way back to Israel from India. And last week, she was sentenced to 7.5 years in Russian prison. But that's a far harsher sentence than usual. That's why it's widely believed that Moscow is holding the Israeli-American Issachar as a political prisoner in order to leverage the return of Russian hacker Alexei Burkov. Burkov, who is also widely thought to be a Russian intelligence agent, is currently set for extradition to the United States for embezzlement charges. What we still don't yet know, then, is what will come of Burkov and Issachar, as at this time there is still no decision.
All right, moving on, Kurdish and Syrian defense forces are now officially calling on Israel and other neighboring countries to get involved in the conflict with Turkey, while Turkish military forces continue to gather on the Syrian border. The Kurdish-Turkish ceasefire ends tonight at 10 p.m. local time, and Turkish President Erdogan is vowing to hunt down the Kurds, which he claims are terrorists.
Olursa olur. Olmazsa 120 saatin bittiği dakika kaldığımız yerden devam eder. Teröristlerin başını ezmeyi sürdürürüz.
Well, here now with more, we have former advisor on Kurdish affairs to the Knesset, Eitan Chelnov, and former Peshmerga fighter and political activist Hejar Berenji. Thanks both for joining us. Now, the Turkish ceasefire, as I said before, it ends tonight at 10 p.m. local time, even though we were still seeing attacks from both sides in the last 5 days. Now, what are we expecting to see from the Kurdish people after this ceasefire ends?
Well, I think that you're actually asking the wrong question. It's not about what we can expect to see from the Kurdish people. This ceasefire was forced on them by the U.S. administration on terms that are greatly unfavorable to the Kurds and which essentially give Erdogan at least what he's claimed he wants publicly, which is a buffer zone. I think that we'll continue to see hostilities and continue Turkish aggression against the Kurds.
I think what happens after tonight, 10 p.m. local time, is going to be no difference than what happened in Afrin, because they invaded Afrin before these areas and before this operation. This whole ceasefire and the situation that happened in northern Syria, no matter what happens, the plan to cleansing the Kurds ethnically from the region, it will continue no matter over there. And no matter if there is a fight going to start tonight after 10 p.m. local or not, the struggle of the Kurds to get their rights and the struggle of Turkish governments to basically get rid of all the Kurds in that region, it will continue as it's been hundreds of years.
Now, Putin and Erdogan are meeting today on the future of northeastern Syria. Russia has always been against the Turks trying to invade Syrian territory and sovereignty, but why the change now? What are we seeing here?
Well, I think that we're seeing a relationship of convenience. And an important name was not mentioned here, which is Iran as well,
right,
which has an interest in seeing the American troops leave for their own purposes. And I think that eventually we'll see some sort of most likely non-military struggle for control over northern Syria between the Russians, Iranians, and Assad on one side,
right,
who also have differences of opinion to a certain extent, and the Turks on the other. But they all can agree, step one, before they can kind of sort out their own conflict over the future of that region, is we need to remove the Americans and weaken the Kurdish presence.
So, I mean, and what is the Kurdish response to this meeting that we're going to be seeing between Erdogan and Putin?
I think the meeting between Erdogan and Putin for the Kurds, the Kurds are waiting to see what would be the response of Putin to them, because Putin is the person who can actually change the game in that region right now, and everyone's eyes are there to see what would be the response. Obviously, if Putin changes the game and stops the Turks from operating in that region, it will be a big lose for U.S. side in that region. We have seen in many occasions in the recent years that the strategics of the significance of the Turks in the region has been changed towards Russia. And this is a huge risk for the region and a huge risk for U.S. as well. To be honest with you, Kurds are not very optimistic about the meeting between Putin and Erdogan tonight, because they know that Putin wants to actually keep Turkey on their own side in the situation in the region, and they are working towards their new plan to build a new Eurasia strategy in the region, and they have been somehow successful till now.
Okay, now let's talk about Islamic fighters, because this has been something on everybody's mind, especially Israel. We've seen the escape of hundreds of ISIL fighters during the Turkish operation in northeastern Syria. Do you think that they might try and reform the Islamic State? And Hejar, as a former Peshmerga fighter, you've been in fights in the past. What do you think about the situation on the ground here?
Let me tell you something very important. We have been monitoring the Karachog mountain, which is actually placed right on the border of Iraqi Kurdistan with the Arab region. We have already seen ISIS reforming in those areas, and the U.S. government clearly knows about that. Let's be clear. During the fight against ISIS, International coalition, there would be no way for them to be successful against ISIL without the help of Kurds. And the help of Kurds have been very essential during that fight. We strongly believe with the situation in Syria, ISIS will reform again in this region. And based on the research studies that has happened even in the Western countries like USA, they are saying that the danger of reforming ISIS in the region is very serious. And this time they will be even more powerful in the region. So right now, the risk of reforming ISIS in this region is very, very high.
All right. Well, Eitan, that of course brings me to you. What should Israel be doing here? That's a question. Should Israel be getting involved? Should there be a boots-on-the-ground approach here? Or is this not Israel's issue?
Well, look, I can't speak on behalf of the Israeli government. However, I think it's not realistic that there will be boots on the ground in Syria, unfortunately. And however much I think the Kurds and many Israelis, by the way, as well, would like to see. In fact, there's a petition going around of IDF reservists basically saying that they believe the government should intervene. The Kurds today called for an Israeli intervention. Unfortunately, for various geopolitical reasons, I don't think that's likely. And we're likely to see maybe further lip service being done by the Israeli government, words of support, and maybe tweets as if they have some greater tangible value. But I don't think that there will be anything overt being done by the Israeli government to change facts on the ground. If there are things happening behind closed doors that we don't know about, it's a possibility, but we also have to keep in mind that the Israeli relationship with the Kurds, for the most part, is centered around Iraqi Kurdistan. And there's always been less of a relationship in Syrian Kurdistan. These are ultimately unified people spread between different countries. And whose fates are all intertwined on the one hand, but have gone through very different journeys over the past several decades. And so for various reasons, the relationship is stronger in Iraq than is in Syria. I would love to see the government do something, but I don't have the magical solution, and I'm not sure that anybody in the government does either. I think that what we can do is push the American administration to re-engage in the region and come in defense of the Kurds. If American troops return to Syrian Kurdistan tomorrow, all of this can stop. And the most likely way for that to happen is for unanimous international and domestic pressure to be put on the U.S. government. And that can include pressure from Israel, which right now we're not doing, in order to see that happen.
All right. Well, you know, unfortunately, we're running out of time here. But Hajar, are there any last words, any last message that you would like to send to the Israelis and the state of Israel? I know we haven't really touched the American side of this, but we are here in Israel.
What we see right now, to be honest with you, the picture on the streets right now in the Kurdistan and generally within the Kurds is that they see Israel. Okay, we hear the tweets, we hear the people of Israel, we hear them trying to backing us up with tweets and words and demonstrations from Israel, which we greatly appreciate. We know that. But what we really expect is that as we see ourselves totally alone in the world right now, in those moments, we know Israeli people had hard moments in the history. And this is our hard moment, that Israelis and the government of Israel needs to understand that, which would affect the future relations and which would affect the future relations between those people and those nations in the region. I do agree with Eitan that there are things that Israeli government can do, not just militarily involved in the situation or trying to control the situation in the region because of all the known geopolitical situations, but definitely we expect more than tweets and slogans on the streets.
All right. Well, Hajar, thank you so much for joining us. Eitan, you as well. And we're going to have to see how this plays out, unfortunately. Does living in a rich country mean that everyone is better off? Well, Israel was just ranked one of the countries in the world with the highest number of wealthy people. And for more details on this, we're joined by ILTV's Shanna Fuld. Hello, Shanna.
Hi.
All right.
Let's get down to it. Israel was ranked by Credit Suisse the 23rd country in the world with the most amount of millionaires. There's 131,000 millionaires living in Israel, which is quite impressive for the size. So I looked into this a little bit, and I thought to myself, with a country that has so many people living in debt, and the average person is $7,000 US in debt
how
in
is
Israel,
this possible, right?
How is it possible that it has the most wealthy people, and what does that mean? So I spoke with Alex Coleman. He's a doctor from IDC Herzliya, very focused on tech and economics. And he told me that this basically comes from the fact that the tech sector in Israel, they have such high salaries in comparison to everybody else.
Well, yeah, I mean, we recently covered how the average salary in Israel has actually risen to, I think, around 11,000 shekels a month, but that's largely due to the startup and tech sector where people are just making higher salaries. So everybody else, you know, the other 60% who are under that aren't really being impacted.
That's like the people in math class who are angry about that one guy who ruins the curve for everybody.
Exactly.
That's what that's like.
Welcome to Israel.
So the people that are at the bottom are in service industry jobs. They're working at supermarkets.
Right.
They're working at packing businesses.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that the wealth disparity is actually growing. The rich are getting richer. The poor are getting poorer.
Well, there's a statistic saying that 20% of Israelis live under the poverty line, which is one of the highest in the OECD.
So it's not necessarily so excellent that there's 131,000 millionaires in Israel.
Well, not for us, but certainly for them. I mean, it says a lot about living in this country. You do have the ability to, I guess, make money, even though that sometimes feels hard for a lot of people who are probably watching this.
Yes, but not only that, within the next 5 years, there's supposed to be 40,000 more millionaires. So I think that people who are watching us should try to put themselves into that category.
All right, I will definitely keep my eye on that. I'm gonna pray about that every night. We'll just put it that way. All right, Shanna, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
All right, it's time for our local news segment where we're going to get into some of the more hyper-local stories that affect the people of Israel. And Nindy Manson is here with us, so tell us what is up first.
All right, so first story, an Israeli man was actually escorted off of an airplane on its way back to Israel. They were flying from Sicily back to Tel Aviv.
Okay.
So the father, mother, and their 3 children were all seated separately. They were told before they got on the plane they would figure it out on the aircraft.
Plane, yeah.
And then it didn't get resolved. The father apparently got very upset.
Good old Israeli fathers. When they have their demands, they want their demands.
Yes, so he wanted to sit next to his son. Did not happen. He got upset, and they actually brought 5 police officers onto the plane to take him off.
Right, so this is all over the news here in Israel because people are upset that he was separated from sitting with his son. He was left behind. That's probably very traumatizing for this family.
It's unclear how old the son was. I mean, if he was 3 or something, I get it, but if he's like a teenager, then could sit alone. I don't know. I think it depends.
All right, give us something happier.
Story number 2. So Cedo is an Israeli company that actually makes at-home marijuana growing boxes. It looks like a mini fridge in the home. It grows weed. It grows other plants.
Okay.
And they have actually just signed Snoop Dogg as one of their brand ambassadors.
So Snoop Dogg is going to be one of the faces of Israel.
I think so. So basically, because they looked at his songs, and I guess someone who sings "Smoke Weed Every Day" needs to be promoting at-home marijuana growing.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, Israel is obviously one of the leaders when it comes to research and development, which is why we see products like this. All right, Nini, well, thank you for these updates.
My
very,
pleasure.
very interesting. I'm glad to know that Snoop Dogg will have something.
Face of Israel.
Yeah, the new face of Israel. I don't know how I feel about that. All right. Now, Israel may not be known for setting the most athletic records, but when it comes to the kitchen, especially during the high holidays, you better watch out how much you challenge your average Israeli family. The southernmost kibbutz in Israel has set a new record for making the longest date roll cake in the world. You're probably thinking, were they actually beating anybody else out? But the answer doesn't matter because they did it. Kibbutz Eilot used about 100 kilograms of majul dates to make a 57-meter-long date cake, and the dates are from their very own palm groves. Now, the entire kibbutz actually came together to build this creation, and best of all, once they finished, the roll cake was donated to families in need. Now, I wonder how many families actually ended up eating this. All right, finally, now the Sukkot holiday is winding down to a close, and every year thousands of migrating pelicans and cranes arrive in Israel from Europe en route to warmer pastures. Now, these pelicans are the largest migrating birds to cross over Israel by air, and there's about 40,000 that make the journey. Pelicans eat so much fish on their journey that farmers have actually created feeding places for the birds, creating a win-win for farmers who aim to protect the natural ebb and flow of the land, as well as the birds who know where they can pick up some grub. As always, this biannual journey is a delight to anyone who is lucky enough to catch it, and it happens once in spring and once in autumn, so consider yourselves lucky. All right, on that note, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight, you can expect partly cloudy skies and cool temperatures. as the average nationwide low sits between 65 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, or between 18 and 21 Celsius. And then tomorrow, we should see scattered showers and a drop in temperatures to an average high of 80 or 27 degrees Celsius. Now, only Eilat in the south is an outlier with a high of 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.54 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.